Hey y'all, it's Pastor Chris. Sorry for the late video. Like many of you, I've been very overwhelmed and disheartened and dismayed with everything that's going on in our country. It is incredibly frustrating, the sheer volume of lying and misinformation that is going on. I don't feel like Jesus ever gave us a good blueprint for how to deal with folks who just simply deny reality. And like I said in a previous video, I feel like that's our primary problem right now, is that we have two sides that are living in completely different realities. Obviously, there is a truth. There is something that is true. And it feels incredibly difficult right now, not only to discern the truth, but then to talk to people across the aisles when we believe that something different is true, is factual. Obviously, for me, I definitely have a hard time believing anything that comes out of this administration's mouth. When I watch them every day blatantly lying. I mean, the assertion that Ukraine started the war between Ukraine and Russia is an outright lie. I was there. So were all of you. We watched Russia invade Ukraine unprovoked. So for me, it's very clear who's lying, but it's apparently not clear to everybody, and it's really hard to have conversations, civil conversations, with folks who just outright denied the truth, right? So that's where I am today, and that's why I'm coming to you a day late, because I'll be honest, I just got completely overwhelmed with all of the information that has been coming out. But I don't want this video to be on that. Today, I want to talk about something that somebody asked me to share, and that was to talk about the argument that allowing people to be gay is a slippery slope to allowing pedophilia, that there's been this argument put forth of slippery slopes. And they asked me to address that. And so what I want to say about that, first and foremost, is that the slippery slope argument, I took a class on argumentation in college. It was part of my writing minor, and we talked about all of these different logical fallacies, and the slippery slope argument is one of those logical fallacies. What I mean by logical fallacy is that it's not something that proves your argument. You might think that it is, but it doesn't. One of the most famous logical fallacies is the ad hominem, which means that when you've resorted to attacking your opponent, you've lost the argument, right? This is when you just sort of call your opponent names. We're seeing a lot of this on social media. If you have to resort to calling somebody a name, you've lost the argument. Another one of these logical fallacies is called the straw man argument, and we see a lot of that as well, which is simplifying your opponent's argument to make it easier to attack. But then you've created a different argument altogether, and oftentimes the response to this is, that's not really what I was saying, but sure, right? So the slippery slope argument is a logical fallacy, and that's to say that, well, if we allow this, then what's to stop us from going here? Well, saying we're not going to go there is what's to stop us from going there, right? Like you could say that with anything. You could apply the slippery slope argument to literally anything, to say that, well, if we allow this, then what's to stop us from going here? But we have guardrails, boundaries in place for a reason, right? So with respect to sexuality, one of our from a progressive standpoint, one of the boundaries, the primary boundary, I would say, is consent, okay? And children cannot consent to sex, right? So there, in fact, is not a slippery slope from LGBTQ sexuality to pedophilia, because we've put up a wall on the slope to stop us from slipping down it, and that wall is consent. Now, at the risk of making this video way too long, I do think there's an interesting moral and ethical question when it comes to dealing with certain pathologies like pedophilia, things that people have that they can't necessarily help, right? And how we classify those and how we treat those pathologies in our society. You know, some people would argue that, for instance, gender dysphoria is a pathology that needs to be treated rather than accepted. So rather than offering gender-affirming care to folks, the thought is that we should instead try to fix the gender dysphoria, right? So ethically, how do you decide between what is a created part of somebody's identity that needs affirming versus what is maybe a pathology that needs to be addressed and healed in some way? And I really don't think there's an easy answer here. I don't. Obviously, we do not want to have somebody, an adult with pedophilia, harming children. Okay, we don't want that. And so it seems easy to say for that category that we are going to try to heal or mitigate or address the pedophilia in a way that prevents that adult from doing harm. For me, that's really what it comes down to when we address these complex ethical issues, is what we are doing to address them causing more harm, hurting, or providing healing. Okay, and so in the context of sexuality, when you have two people who are consenting adults who find love with one another, from my perspective, it's hard for me, and it's always been hard for me, even back when I was a kid and I was against LGBTQ. It's hard for me to see how that is causing harm to anybody, right? How it is actively hurting somebody, where it's very easy for me to see how somebody acting on pedophilia with a child would be causing harm. Okay, and so from my perspective, we need to be addressing all of these issues from the standpoint of providing healing. And I understand we may disagree on how that looks, but for me, I'm always wanting to ask the person who is involved, who we're addressing, to try to gain a better perspective on what would be healing for them. And obviously, with sexual relationships, if you're including more than one person, you need to ensure that the outcome is healing for all parties involved and not hurtful, right? Now, I do think there's a lot more that can be said about this. I think, hookup culture, for example, can be harmful even if you have two parties that are consenting. I don't think that we can fall back on the black and white understanding of only marriage between one man and one woman. And from my experience, that actually can be harmful and can rupture relationships and tear apart families. So there's a lot of nuance here, but I do think consent is the primary boundary that we need to really uphold, especially now when you have somebody in the White House who does not respect consent at all. That's going to be it for me. I keep breaking the golden rule of TikTok and making these videos way too long, but if you've stuck around all the way to the end, I thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. I promise I'll be back again tomorrow with a new video. Until then, take care.